All right. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Wow, great to see folks filing in for this event. We're excited about today's event. My name is Josh McCullough with Law Insider. I am excited to have a couple great guests, great presenters with us today. We'll introduce them, Polly and Jamie, coming up here in just a little bit. We are approaching the top of the hour, so while folks file in, I'm going to go ahead and deal with just a little bit of housekeeping stuff, but very promptly, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie and Polly and the team at Deployed for the content. We have a lot of great content, so I'll be pretty quick with the housekeeping. Basic webinar stuff. So we do have the chat open for everybody. You are welcome to participate in the chat. Would love to see, we have a global audience, would love to see where folks are joining us from. I'm in Frisco, Texas. If anybody knows where that is, it's just outside of Dallas. I'll go ahead and kick off the chat. So if you're comfortable letting us know where you're joining us from, would love to hear from you in the chat there. All right, Missoula, Montana. I want to get to Montana. Like, I want to live in Montana right now. We've literally been talking about that. Awesome. Denton, Texas, you're right in my backyard. Cool. Brazil, love seeing this. Such a global audience. It's really cool. All right, so chat is activated. That is phenomenal. The difference between chat and Q&A. Chat, feel free to engage in whatever way you would like. But if you've got questions you would like to see addressed in some way, shape, or form by our presenters, whether that's in today's webinar or follow up, but it is a legit question about the content or something related to the content, please use the Q&A. It gives us better reportability. It makes sure that nothing gets lost in the fold and that we're able to see the question and respond to it either today or after the event or whatever it might be. Please use the Q&A for that. We are going to do one poll a little bit later. There'll be a little window that pops up. We'll share the feedback from that poll. It's kind of integrated with the content. We think the results of it will be insightful for you. So keep an eye on that poll. We will be sending recordings, slides, everything within a day or two after the webinar today. With that, that's the housekeeping stuff. So I'm excited to turn it over to Polly and Jamie, and they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves and Deployed and kick off today's content. So Jamie, I believe, or Polly, I don't know who's first, but take it away. Stage is yours.
Thanks, Josh. And hi, everyone. It's great to see where you're from. I'm originally from Perth in Western Australia. I currently live in Spain. I'm in Barcelona, so suffering through the heat that many of us are in the US and the Mediterranean are going through. It's fantastic to see you today, and I want to welcome you to the Lost in Scope webinar. So scope is one of the most problematic things to get right. And how do we know this? And why are you here? Well, here's what we know. Projects with bad scope fail 100 times more frequently than those with good scope. Projects on the whole, where they do get measured, fail to meet objectives more than 50% of the time. And scope creep, the notion that the original scope that you agreed needs changing, occurs an astonishing 70% of the time in statements of work. These are, frankly, incredible statistics, and it's no wonder that many people get lost in scope. And here's an example of a scope statement. It's a description of the work that is being delivered. So when we started working through on this webinar, this is the scope that you would expect to see. So let's walk through it as an example. Develop a webinar for a group of legal practitioners. Give it a catchy title so that more people sign up. Keep it short. Make sure that people don't lose interest. Make sure it covers a wide range of topics. Give it sections to make it easy to understand. Demonstrate your expertise by showing statistics. Use an element of conversational science to show how scope is created. Give you an understanding of how disputes occur, and end with a killer conclusion, and then deliver it. But how do you go from this abstract construct to a contract? And how do you make decisions about scope to legally protect your employer or your client? So today, we're going to talk about a few things. What is scope? We're going to help you rethink who's involved in scope, the importance of scope and how to minimize risk, what goes wrong and how to avoid those issues. We're going to bring it right back down to something that everyone can understand, which is cake. I'm going to tell you a user story about a baker and a cake, and what goes into each section to make it clear. And then the most common SOW pitfalls and how to avoid them. And somewhere in there, we're going to weave in a killer conclusion. So we'll yet to see. So my name is Jamie Gannaway. My fellow astronaut on this journey is Polly Lindley, and she's a director of learning. Thanks, Polly. You'll be hearing a lot from me to begin with, but then you will, then Polly is going to take over. I saw a question there. Yes, we'll send the slides as well. So the content today is based on our client interactions, tens of thousands of scope and statement of work that we've analyzed, and it's underpinned by a concept called conversational science. And our advisor, Elizabeth Stokoe, is a professor at the London School of Economics. I advise you to go look at her TED talk that she does about the power of words, and scope is all about words. And so we use a lot of that foundational science that builds up to how we talk today about scope. But how can we, as two people here, talk about with authority about statements of work? So we work with some of the largest companies in the world on how they operate services procurement and developing best practice scopes for hundreds of complex services. But most recently, we're super excited that we got funding from Microsoft Ventures, which is the investment arm of Microsoft, who invested in us to develop our platform using things like OpenAI and other technologies. And so if you're interested in those topics, we'll have some call outs at the end to be able to share with you as well. Our platform is a consumer designed writing space. I'm going to pause for a minute. I'm not selling you software. I'm just telling you what we do, and then I'm going to just download on you all of the things we've learned. So this is the last slide on software until we get to a optional demo at the end. So we help our clients construct perfectly formed scopes and statements of work built within the guardrails of policies set by clients. We are not a bidding platform. We actively encourage our buy-side clients to work with their preferred suppliers to foster better relationships. Right, a poll first to get people excited. We are just, okay, there we go.
Hi. So I'm going to introduce this poll. I think you can see it now. How often do you work on statements of work? So is it never? You're completely new to this. Very occasionally, for example, every 6 months. And I know this isn't going to scoop up everyone, but it's just to give us an indication. So quite often and frequently, like the answers coming in there. So we've got 7%, quite often I see them every few weeks, going up to 40. We've got 6% at the moment with never. So people completely new to statements of work and scope. And so frequently and quite often is the majority of the audience with about 77%. So that's great. That's just going to help us know exactly who we're speaking to. But we are going to need to cover the basics as well for that 6%. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. I'll hand back to you, Jamie.
Thank you. That's really interesting results. And so I think we pitched this at the right level. You'll see some generic information that caters for the people that perhaps are new. And for those that are more experienced, maybe it will give you a different view as to how perhaps we look at it. But first, let's get on the same page. So SOW is used interchangeably, could be scope of work or statement of work. Statement of work is the legal document in which the scope is nested, it sits in there. So the statement of work includes everything that is necessary for a scope to become a contract. Whereas the scope of work is, and we tend to call the scope of work just scope, not SOW. So we save that acronym for the statement of work. So scope is not just the words that summarize the work. It's comprised of the deliverables, the dates, the milestones, and how the work will be accepted. So if you think about this, for goods, it's easy to receive a thing, something from Amazon. Did it arrive? Yes, received. For services, scope is harder to receive as it is sometimes intangible. So effort has to be made not to stop at just at the description, but to spell out what it is to receive an acceptable service. And we're going to break this down in a cake and a baker example later. I'm just noticing there's a few people talking about the, hey, Josh, you're okay with the slides?
Yeah, I can't replicate the issue, so I think it might be one-off or more related with somebody's
Sure.
personal settings. So it appears to be okay. I apologize you're having the issue. I'm just saying, worst case, we will make sure that you get the slides afterwards if you want to reference those.
Okay, thank you. And where does a statement of work sit? Now, depending on the size of your organization, this can change. But for us, and when we work with mid-cap companies to enterprises, it tends to sit somewhere between a master service agreement and a purchase order. So in some cases, a statement of work has no legal terms, no strict legal terms, because they're either in the MSA or they're in the purchase order. But sometimes a statement of work for, say, smaller companies might include all the legal things that you require. So we appreciate that actually there are a number of different ways of where a statement of work might sit. But in a hierarchy, it tends to sit, in our experience, between there. So when we talk about legal terms, we're not talking the full things you would expect as terms and conditions in an MSA or a purchase order. It's that nice little sweet spot that concentrates more on the commercial aspects of work. So what are the components of a statement of work? And this is really important. And again, talking about scope and how we define it. So what are the legal components? So we break them into different types of clauses. Now, this might not be, I'm sure there are more learned people who have certifications and come from law, but in our layperson's terms, we talk about like this. We have boilerplate clauses. So all the things that you would have, like the parties or the signature, they're the static elements. Second thing, we call them commercial clauses. So these relate to the work being performed. That would be like the pricing or the linkages between deliverables, milestones, and acceptance criteria. But finally, we have legal clauses, which can be either passive or active. So active is in the sense of things about how you manage obligations. It could be about audit. It could be about warranties. It could be about invoicing and payment. These are, inverted commas, clauses that remain really active within a statement of work. You can't just leave them to the side. Whereas passive is more of the things that protect you if something goes wrong. So in the absence of these, it's limitations of liability, it's termination, it's dispute resolution. So if something goes wrong, you need those protections. And we've coined these as active and passive. And we're going to come back to passive, because this is sometimes the safe playground for legal teams, where working with clauses that safeguard the business if something goes wrong. But what we want you to do is start working and thinking more about these active clauses, because they're so closely associated with scope, advising your teams on how you promote best practice rather than just simply ensuring that you have preventative questions. And the reason you need to focus on this is that if scope is vague, it makes the rest of this job really difficult. You can't agree warranties if you don't know what you're warranting. You can't protect the organization if you don't know what you're insuring against. And you can't write acceptance criteria if you don't know what to accept. So it all comes back to this pyramid of scope and the need for clarity and precision in what's being delivered to make the rest of the journey a lot easier, because it's very hard to get that definition if you haven't first worked and developed a good scope. Now, finally, as promised, these are the standard components we'd expect to see in a statement of work. At the end, there'll be an option for you to write to us, and we'll supply you with our best practice statement of work that we've been developing over the years. But there's only two call outs I want to make here as a summary, which is that all successful projects that we review as statements of work for our clients, they always include an out of scope section. So it's an interesting observation that the ones where we have seen success, they tend to clarify what is out of scope of the work. This is a great way of reducing scope creep and removing ambiguity from the service. And out of all the unsuccessful projects we review, a majority of them, not all, but a majority of them tend to include a section on assumptions. We typically recommend that you eliminate assumptions from SOW agreements and move them into customer dependencies or supply dependencies. Because for the more complex work, we tend to see the list of assumptions get larger and larger, which means that ambiguity is created before you're even engaging in the work. This is a controversial topic because many statement of work templates have assumptions, and you tend to think about assumptions as a catch-all for the weaknesses in the definition. my position would be you have to work really, really hard to make sure that those assumptions turn into things to be done or things that are excluded. So I know often controversial, but we'll see from some of the questions. Right, so
Jamie, can I just draw your attention to a really great question that's just come in from Ronnie Hendricks. He said, can we describe or give an example of out of scope? And I wondered if I should just share that example of the banking example that we had.
Yes, great.
So thanks for that, Ronnie. So we have a client who's a bank who shall remain nameless, and they had a statement of work. They wanted a report on the state of the market, and the supplier, it was rushed through. The supplier thought that it was the state of the UK market, and the bank thought it was the state of a worldwide market. Clearly, that's a huge thing to misunderstand, but it's something that's easily done if these things are rushed through and everybody thinks that it's unambiguous, when in fact, there are issues and misunderstandings. So just by having an out of scope discussion, so what isn't in scope might have uncovered the fact that obviously the supplier would say, well, clearly, anything outside of the UK is not in scope. And they'd say, well, hang on, that's what we want. We want the worldwide one. So it's just another opportunity for discussion. We talk a lot about conversation, and any kind of interaction is in fact a conversation, which humans are really good at. But as soon as you put it in a document and back and forth and redline it, that conversation can break down really quite easily. So having that discussion is just another way of uncovering unknowns in the statement of work or in the scope. So we encourage everyone to discuss it live, and we'll get to that later. But thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Polly. Yes, I'd forgotten about that one. That was controversial, to say the least. And part of this, and this comes to collaborating and making sure that there's very good communication, not only between the provider and the buyer, but actually between teams. And we want to introduce you to a concept that we use in not only our platform, but in the learning that we've developed with Polly over the last 18 months as well. And it's a concept of who is actually involved in scope. And rather than consider people as the project manager, the PMO lead, the head of sales, is to think of them in an ecosystem as follows. You have authors, you have teams who draft statements of work. In fact, it's millions of people across the globe. Anyone could be an author of work. They could be writing down the thing that they want done. It could be a service provider, it's a project manager, it's a business stakeholder. Anyone can write scope. And we're going to get into where scope comes from in a moment. So authors are a really important role that we need to consider when thinking about scope. Secondly, and perhaps most of the people on this call might be involved in this, are editors. So editors are teams who proofread and approve statements of work. It could be lawyers, it could be procurement, internal legal teams, compliance, risk, finance. Anyone who receives a scope to review and actually gives feedback is an editor. And the unique thing about scope is that there are actually very few people who edit scope. There's very few people who actually will stand up and say that doesn't sound good enough, because they don't think that they're actually have the confidence to comment. But we're going to just illustrate how important this unique role as editor is. And finally, we talk about publishing, those who actually have the right to run a project and start one. So this could be sales leaders on the sales side, P&L owners, change directors, lawyers again, who tend to, particularly general counsels and internal legal, have more of a role to play, contract leads, operational leaders, anyone who has a say in the budget. The interlock between them happens best between an editor and an author. So if you're on this call and you have a role where you're actually reviewing statements of work, mark my words, there's very few people who are actually commenting to say, hey, I think that scope could have more detail. And as an editor, as there's millions of authors, but there's only thousands of editors, anyone who plays that role should have a right to say this doesn't look right, or maybe we should comment on things that I normally wouldn't. And getting to that point of not what normally wouldn't, we work with legal teams, we work with procurement teams, and we work with other roles like compliance and risk. But here's some comments that we've heard, which is, I'm a lawyer, I have no expertise in scope. Or I look at scope for context, but I'm not an expert, so I shouldn't comment. or even the supplier knows best and they're the ones who know how to write the work. I like this comment. I build guardrails if things go wrong. It's procurement's job to look at their work. So I think the illustration I'd like to give here and remind you is that the best time to implement scope is before the signature occurs. Our statistics are correct. More than 50% do not meet objectives, and more than 70% have scope creep. It's an enormous figure. So something's happening wrong in that communication where something's being missed, and we're not putting a hand up to say, actually, I think we could improve that statistic. So you're more likely to promote a successful project if you get involved at that pre-signature phase than post-signature. And it's not to mean you can't influence after, but it's just difficult before. There's a couple of questions there. Maybe you're typing answers, but I can...
I am typing answers, Jamie, at the moment.
Fantastic. Okay. Oh, just hang on. I don't know what's happening there. It's clicking ahead. Excuse me. There we go. I have to press the up button. So why are scopes so important and why is it so difficult? So I'm going to give you some market context now. So when we pitch to VCs, which are venture capital firms, both in the US and the UK, the question we got asked is, how large is the market for scope? Now, how enormously difficult is that to calculate? But we've had a go at it. And the only way we could try and illustrate why statements of work and also scopes are actually increasing in importance is by comparing them against another way of engaging for work, and that's the permanent contract. So here's what we learned, is the frequency and use of statements of work as a driver of our economy is actually dramatically increasing. So compared to permanent employment, the number of freelancers, outsourced, third-party roles is increasing at a faster rate. Now, maybe this is because of digital nomads, the Great Resignation, remote working, outsourcing as a general trend. But these are all driving new ways of working that are defined more by scope rather than job title. Now, from our calculations, every person that works under a statement of work, they have to sign something every 42 days per person based on the work that's done. And we've worked, there's a McKinsey and Harvard Business Review report, which talks about the project economy currently worth 9 trillion is going to be worth 12 trillion by 2030. When you think about a permanent employment contract, depending on how long a person stays, you're signing it once every 2-point-something years. So any third-party work that is done on that left-hand side is on a short-term contract, and that world is ruled by scope. So it brings us to our next question, which is who and where does scope come from? So scope is creative. That's the thing to remember. Contracts can be more structured. I mean, arguably contracts and legal terms are also creative, but scope is creative. They come from in our world, 3 different places. They're creative or prompted these days. So these could be creative words drafted for the immediate purpose of a scope for the service that is being procured or sold. Secondly, and we do see this quite often, is it's cut and paste from a sales document or an RFP or an RFX. So this could be used as the baseline for a scope of work. And you see these CPQ engines that you might, and some people on the call might have been involved with, or RFX platforms where you fill in a scope and might refine it using ChatGPT. But in more advanced cases, procuring organizations or sales organizations may have basic repositories and libraries of statements of work and service descriptions, but then they're highly customized. So no matter what process you go through out of these 3, you're actually coming from a place where it's still going through a human filter who is writing something down to either reflect the sales opportunity or the buying opportunity, which means that I love the UK word, it's bespoke, it's highly customized, highly individual, and it's been crafted for that exact example that you're looking for. So it's very difficult for you to say, oh, this sounds like something else, because it might be a different region, it might be a different supplier, it might be a different client. It creates a complexity in benchmarking because of the variation in the individualization of that work. And so it's just to reflect that that happens, and you can't solve everything or benchmark everything, but you can look for clues and you can look for consistency by applying some of the learnings that we'll provide you today. So an example would be on the left-hand side, you can have enough information to provide context for the statement of work. Or on the right-hand side, if we just, Josh and I and Polly had a quick conversation, it's like, hey, do a webinar. I mean, who knows what we would turn up with today if we were given full license. It might be a sales pitch and pure slideware on our features and demos. So I'm glad that we worked through it, because we talked about your needs as recipients of this webinar. We made sure that we really broke it down, spent the time and energy to try and craft something that suits you, rather than trying to quickly flip through something and get it done. And I think the investment pays off, particularly in more complex services. So statistics were offered, you can see there. Make sure we have statistics to keep it interesting and show our expertise. We work with another organization called World Contracting and Commerce, and we've been working with them for some time. They produced a fantastic report with iCertis, contract management platform that we admire very much. And I think for 3 years running, they've done a report on the most negotiated clauses, what takes up time, the change each year in where disputes occur. And I've just got 2 slides on this that I thought was interesting. So for the 3rd year running, scope and goals specification has been listed as the #1, or in legal case, #2, most important term. But I find the next slide really interesting, which is the most frequent sources of disagreements, claims and disputes. Whilst sell side and buy side put scope and goals quite high, as in the top 3 or 4, legal have it at the very bottom. And so I was trying to think of a conclusion to this as to the perceptions of disputes, or perhaps who's responsible for solving certain disputes. And we're wondering, and maybe this might be nice to see on the chat, is procurement, legal, finance, they all have their domains if there's a dispute to solve. So if there's a dispute about insurance or liability, it goes straight to legal. But if there's a dispute about scope and goals, actually, who negotiates that? Who reflects on the scope that went wrong, or the articulation of requirements that perhaps missed the mark and had 17 different scope extensions for some reason? So I think when we think about where disputes are perceived to come from, or where you get involved, I find that the split between the business and, say, legal quite interesting about who's solving them. So I think I've ticked the box now of the statistics and interesting facts. And now we're going to move on to hearing less from me, I've now spoken for 27.5 minutes. I think we're on track for time. And move it to Polly, who's going to show you illustrate to you our iterative model that we use for scope, and give some great examples, specifically digestible chunks about cake, and how we navigate scopes of work when we provide our learning, but also in our platform as well.
Thank you, Jamie. And if you could just take over having a look at those Q&As and chats for me, that would be absolutely brilliant. So this is our statement of work iterative model, and it's a very simple idea. And it's that a statement of work is a linear document, but when you approach statement of work creation, we don't want you to think of it in a linear way. We don't want you to think of writing one block and moving on to the next block and moving on to the next block, because it's actually dynamic. It's like a machine that works together to deliver the work. And here you'll see we encourage people to get together and actually discuss the different sections. One of the big risks with statement of work is that it's all done by email. There's a reason why conversation works. It's because it helps to clarify. You understand other people's perspective. You can echo back what's been said to check for understanding. That's really difficult to do if you're doing it by email. So here, this takes me on to the next thing. So we encourage people to go around that circle and round that circle, wherever you start on that circle we just saw. So if you start discussing deliverables, if you start by discussing the See Jamie's having some excitement around slide movement.
I'm so excited, sorry.
Wherever you start on that circle is going to help inform everybody's understanding of the work. And so we encourage you to look at it iteratively and not as a linear document. And in the center there, we see questions, clear writing, and collaboration, which we see as the 3 core underpinning skills from statements of work. It's really easy to think about it as a document, but actually it's people, and people are messy, and we need to try and gather the people together and collaborate on this piece of work. And that starts right at the statement of work process, and it follows through into when you hand that statement of work over to the project team. And again, don't do that by email. Don't send an email, here's the statement of work. And I know this perhaps doesn't relate directly to all of your roles, but it's important that that collaboration happens throughout the process, because you don't want to get to the end of the project and receive a call to say, hasn't been delivered, we didn't understand what we were doing, we read the document, it didn't make sense, we've delivered something different, and now we don't want to pay. So it's really important, that collaboration piece, really important. Thank you, Jamie. If you go to the next slide. So one of the ways to de-risk is to make sure that people have actually met in person and discussed this piece, or not in person necessarily, but have had a live conversation, be it on the phone, virtually, to discuss the work, to uncover those unknowns. Because a lot of the time you'll hear, oh, we didn't know that at the beginning, or we didn't realize that hadn't been done, or we didn't know how long this thing was going to take us. So some time invested here, and you'll hear a lot from procurement, we just don't have the time. But also the time it will take them later to redline a document or try and sort out a dispute is going to be so much longer. So even if you just get on the telephone for 20 minutes, if it's a small piece of work, and we call that the microscope meeting, and that is just so important that has happened, that people have actually discussed this piece of work live. And we definitely recommend that for our clients. So if you go on to the next one, Jamie, we've got going back to the biggest question of all, and we find this a lot. Why is the work being done? Is something that is often not well understood. And one of the learners in one of my courses said, oh, I tried that question, why? And the project manager didn't actually know, and they had to go back to the business. So sometimes you'll find that actually the reason why the work is being done is poorly understood. And it's very, very difficult to write good scope and good statements of work if you don't understand the need you're trying to meet. You might write in work that is unnecessary. You might write in work that doesn't meet the need. You won't be able to craft deliverables, and you won't be able to craft payment milestones and outcomes that make any sense unless you understand the objective that's trying to be achieved. Or you'll start the project and everyone will go off in the wrong direction, not realizing what the North Star is, if you like, which they're all running towards. So this question, why, we try and empower everybody to ask this, nobody to feel worried about asking it. We try and make sure that authors are trained to expect this question from procurement, to expect this question from legal, so that everybody can understand the context for the work, so that when they're doing their review, when they're doing their edits, they know what the purpose of the work is. So that's, if you take away one thing today, that's making sure everybody knows why, and there's a clear goal set for the work. I'm just going to check the time, we've got a few minutes left. I want to talk briefly about cake. So we thought about lots of different complex projects we could talk to you about today, but we wanted to simplify it. So a business wants to buy a cake, and they've got a third-party supplier who wants to provide the cake. So let's see some of the things that can go wrong by looking at the different sections. So again, we go back to our iterative circle, and we're looking at scope. So when we talk about scope, that thing that Jamie has been showing you is a scope statement, which is also known as a service description. And if we have a quick look at our cake one. Oh, our cake one is not there. So obviously, if we're describing a cake, you want to say, okay, it's 20 inches, it's got white icing, it needs to feed 20 people. And that is the deliverable for the cake, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, we reduced scope because we thought we talked about that quite a lot in the context, and so
okay, no problem. Yeah,
deliverables now.
Okay, so obviously we have a description of the cake. It's a birthday cake. It's a vanilla cake. It's got cream, and then you have the deliverable, and the deliverable is the cake itself and the messaging, and that's going to help you make sure that the baker knows exactly what they're doing, and also the business knows exactly what they're going to receive. So at Deployed, we love tables. Our software obviously is responsive, and the tables respond to the different schedules you choose. But if you were laying it out in a document, you might lay it out like this, if you're laying it out in a Word doc. So we have a deliverables table. Really important is acceptance criteria. So you might have that deliverable of the cake, but how do you know that you're going to be happy to receive it? You might say it's not damaged, the box isn't damaged, it's fresh, all these different things. And you might have payment milestones. So you might say, we're going to give you 20% up front, and then we're going to pay 60% on receipt of the cake, and we're going to pay 20% when we're satisfied that we received it in the condition that we described in the acceptance criteria. This is really, really important, and it's actually something that even professional procurement people can get wrong, sometimes because it's hard to explain to the business why it's so important to invest time making sure that you have really clear acceptance criteria. But it's because a lot of the time these deliverables might be linked to payments, or they might be linked to the next phase of the work. Until these are done, we can't move to the next phase of the work. Well, that definition of done is what's going to lead to a lot of dispute. How do you know it's done? And that is what the acceptance criteria is. So here we go. Cake must be delivered intact with no cracks in the icing, and the cake isn't stale. And really important. So if everyone says, oh, wow, it's way too much work to do that for every deliverable, maybe you've got too many deliverables. The deliverables you should have should be necessary, verifiable, and achievable. So only deliverables that are key to the outcome that you want should be included. Because you don't want to do every single thing that's going to happen on the project. That's a waste of everybody's time. And equally, if it's a supplier that you've worked with before, for a deliverable that you've had successfully before, you've had no problems, we're not suggesting you go through this whole process. We're talking about work that perhaps with a new supplier, it's a new deliverable, it's an area the business haven't worked in before. You need to use your judgment as to when these things are important, but certainly new supplier, new product, definitely spend the time getting those acceptance criteria and deliverables right. Obligations. So these are things that the business agrees to do, often seen by the business as a way of keeping them on the hook for something when the supplier should be on the hook for it. But what they should do is spell out exactly what the supplier genuinely needs you to do to be able to successfully deliver this. Done well, you should check with somebody inside the business that they're happy to do it and put a name next to it. Here we've got the buyer must be able to receive the cake on the agreed delivery day. The buyer must pay a deposit of £100 at least 7 days before cake delivery. The buyer must confirm in writing the message that will appear on the cake. So as you can see, none of that is unnecessary. That's all critical to the successful delivery of the cake. Oh, thank you. Gabrielle says that the cake is such a lovely example. We just wanted to take it back to something really, really simple. But as you can see, these are all necessary things. So any unnecessary obligations, let's not have them. Any unnecessary dependencies, we don't want A4 pages and pages of it because it just will be ignored. But tight obligations that can be tracked. And that takes us on to the next section, which I believe, Jamie, is going to be governance or commercial models. People and schedule. We're going to skip over for now. We do it in detail in our learning if anyone wants that. For commercial models.
Oh,
I think
just
there's
getting
are there
excited.
some animations on here that we don't know about?
I've seen this is like from like cool like 90s animations. It's cool. I like it.
So with commercial models, we're not going to go into detail on commercial models today. There's lots of different commercial models. They have a big impact on the work. You should consider very carefully how they're going to help you align to get your outcome. And we've got a quick example here that cake is typically fixed price with a retained payment. And those payment milestones are there to help everybody keep that work on track and make sure that the baker is adequately compensated. Particularly, for example, they want a payment up front because they want to buy the stuff to make the cake, and that's completely fair. If it was work where there isn't a huge amount of work to be done up front, then there's no need for a huge upfront payment. But that's just something we would cover in a much bigger masterclass.
I just want to respond to, so Steve had a good question about, particularly when we're talking about language, which is the implication in obligations and SOW between terms used shall, should, may, must, will. I think it's deontic language, and I forgot what the opposite one is. Deontic is about you shall and you will. We found that in scope you get to lot of less definitive statements. Best endeavors is one that we see all the time, and it's not used to be cheeky. I don't think it's just used to because scope is more of a creative language. It's very difficult to say the word shall, and plus shall has proper legal connotations. So we find that co-authors tend to minimize the kind of shall language in scope, but then you'll see it contrasts to acceptance criteria, which is lots of shall and will. And that's actually where you get a bit of confusion as well, because you have to go into the scope and look at it and look for where it's been watered down, or there's jargon, or there's less specific language that doesn't match up to acceptance criteria, for example. And that then causes some friction, because one might be best endeavors and one might say will. So I think it applies, if we just think about it, statement of work is a legal contract. It is a document of obligations. So the weaker the scope is and less specific, the more danger occurs to obligations management from that work.
Thank you, Jamie. So this is just the reminder that how you pay people will affect what they do. This isn't to be negative towards suppliers. It's just to say that people are naturally incentivized to work towards the things that are going to release payment. So be very careful if you are setting any kind of payment structure which relates to payment milestones, deliverables. Make sure that they are the ones that you definitely want for the outcome for your projects. And I don't think there's any more we can say about that today, but do sign up to the e-learning if you want to learn more. And this is governance, which I was going to talk about earlier, which is you can create the most brilliant statement of work you want, and it on paper could deliver everything you want, but you need to make sure that there's going to be regular check-ins that are appropriate for that work. So if someone is sending you a jumper, then obviously you don't need a report and a meeting to confirm that you've received your jumper. But if somebody's doing a complex service over 11 months, that's quite a high value, then obviously you are going to need meetings and reports to keep that work on track. And so something that's often overlooked in a statement of work is it's an opportunity to agree that governance. So Jamie, I believe we've got our governance table here. And this is just an example of what a more complicated project might include. It might include a quarterly update. It might include status reports, or probably status reports if you're from America. And this is a great opportunity. If you're working on a project that has a lot of uncertainty, that has a lot of unknowns, that has new teams that haven't worked together before, new deliverables, great to agree this up front, because what you don't want to do is get to the end of the 11 months and find out that actually things have started going wrong in month 2, and there's no way you can remedy it in the final month of the project. And you want to make sure that these meetings are actually happening. So by putting them in the statement of work, it makes everyone agree up front, yes, we'll be available monthly. Yes, we'll do that monthly. Yes, we'll do the report. It helps the provider to make sure they've accounted for it financially. and it makes everyone on the business side be aware what's required. And I think we've all been in that position where you come up for a quarterly meeting and you think, oh, I must check on that, must check on this, must check on that, so that can do an update. It's just a great way to keep the project on track, and the statement of work is a place where you can do that.
I'm getting excited again. Sorry. Right. Thank you, Polly. So there's a number of questions coming back into the chat, and so I'll get to them. But I think one of them was just wanted to speak about in the final couple of minutes is pricing. And Polly pointed to, we have e-learning, we do talk about that, but the spectrum of pricing that you can agree, and then how you adapt language to it. We've worked with statements of work for agile, so governance is more important than the deliverables. We've worked on statements of work that have OKRs in them. So how do you pay on outcomes rather than deliverables? And so there's lots of variability on how you do that with multiple ways of teasing out the type of pricing that you want. So we said we would deliver a killer conclusion for all of this, for all of the behavioral changes, for the question science, for everything. A really good template will get you 80% of the way there. And we know this because we have a digital template, but even a good Word template, just to simply guide better. We've worked with some organizations that have an MSA statement of work template that they've not updated for 20 years, just what page. And we've got some companies that have 75-page statements of work. And I think there's under specking and over specking. So the killer conclusion is it's a really people-oriented and difficult thing to solve, but also you can solve it through providing a framework that your authors can work to, because without that framework, they're writing whatever they want. Questions? We've had some questions.
Yeah, can I just bring one to your attention? So there's one by from James asking about the difference between helping someone prepare for an RFP and whether the things we've been discussing today about preparing work are relevant to somebody who's putting in their best possible offer for work. I was thinking along the lines, Jamie, of the fact that if you're able to seek clarification and collaborate prior to submitting that best possible offer, then that would be relevant. And also the clear writing would be really relevant. So I think wherever possible, you would look to write as clearly as possible in any document whenever possible, so that it's really clear that they understand what they are selecting and buying. That would be my thoughts on it. I don't know if that is along your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, for companies that are bidding work, they have an infrastructure where they probably have a procurement team. So in that regard, the quality of the scope that's requested is only as good as the procurement team and the business trying to articulate it. And often that falls short of what, say, you as an expert service provider would want to know. This is the nature of expertise. The thing that company wants to buy, you as a sell side person, you are more knowledgeable in the thing they want to buy, not just from the thing that you're selling, but the context of the market. And it's something that's really difficult to resolve, because we know that you need to respond specifically to RFP questions, and you bristle because you have a better idea that you want to put forward. So I think any good procurement process will have opportunities for Q&A, for providing better other information, for requesting more information. And I think that's what we want to try and that would be my advice.
Hey, quickly, Polly or Jamie, one, I just wanted to see if I just posted 3 links in the chat. Didn't know if you wanted to kind of explain what those links are to the audience in case they're interested in checking those out.
Absolutely, I'd love to do that. Thank you for that, Josh. And we'd like to say thank you as well before everyone leaves to Law Insider as well for giving us this opportunity, because we really believe in the power of education in relation to statements of work. So it's lovely to have so many people on today and be able to talk to you about this. So if you would like to receive our best practice statement of work template, we've got a link there. Pop your email in and we can send that to you after the session. And we have a 4-hour e-learning statement of work program, which we offer with World Commerce and Contracting. And that is a link to their website where you can purchase that. It's $199. Sometimes whole companies do it and sometimes individuals do it. But it's a great way of making sure that everybody in the company is speaking the same language when it comes to statement of work. We think that one of the things that happens is people are afraid to ask, what is a good deliverable? What is good acceptance criteria? And so we don't want that lack of knowledge to hinder people's ability to deliver good work, because that's really sad. And we do have 8 key questions on our website, which people can give to people in the business who might be struggling, or it might be their first statement of work that they've ever done before. That's downloadable on our website. It's just the 8 key questions they need to answer, mapped to the different sections of the statement of work in really plain language. And then finally, we've got book a call with Deployed. So if you want a consultation on your statements of work, you have any further questions which we've not managed to answer today, then do book an appointment with us. There's some different kinds of appointments on that link, consultations, demos, whatever you would like. And also, if we don't get to all of your questions today, there's been some fantastic questions. It's lovely to see everyone so engaged. We will make sure we answer all those questions and make sure Josh has got them and is able to send them to you. The statement of work template is free of charge, yes. So we actually, our software is able to do a lot more responsively than the template itself. And also it manages collaboration. I think Jamie's going to do a short demo for anyone who wants to stay on the call. And we've got a couple of slides from Law Insider as well. So if anyone wants to see that, they're welcome to stay on and watch that.
Great, thanks. I see a lot of comments about maybe one of the form fields may have an issue, and some folks are having trouble accessing. We will put these links in the follow-up email as well, that will have the slides and the recordings. So rest assured, we'll make sure you get these links, and then anything with that form, we'll look with that form field, we'll look into that and take care of that in due time over the next couple of hours. So really quick, just to give Polly and Jamie a little break. Fascinating stuff, and thank you so much. And I do think they're going to come back, and there's a demo, and then they'll hang around for as long as is possible with to answer other questions. But wanted to take a quick break and talk a little bit about 2 Law Insider opportunities. We've mentioned AI a little bit today. Both of these are related to AI and contracts. We just launched this week the AI Field Guide. So this is a piece of Law Insider premium content. This is the AI Field Guide, a manual for corporate counsel. We all know that AI in a legal sense presents a ton of opportunity, but also a ton of risk. And it's a lot of risk that lies in blind spots that very few people have navigated before. This guide is meant to be that manual for corporate counsel to assess the opportunity and the risk and give you actionable resources to develop your programs and how you are going to address and leverage AI as a company. So you can see the link there. I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat as well. If you give me 1 second. Okay, I'm going to drop this link in the chat. There we go. Learn more about the AI Field Guide. You can read about the creators, the authors. I think there were 4 attorneys that were involved, some legal ops folks, some cool stuff in there. So check that out. Next, another topic that is very much AI and contracts. If you haven't heard, Law Insider and TermScout have a formal partnership now. We are an exclusive reseller for TermScout. If you haven't checked out what TermScout's doing, it's pretty amazing contract review, leveraging AI and market insights. Really cool stuff. We've had some demos over the past few months from the TermScout team. There's a video of some of that on this landing page that you can see at the bottom. I will send that link in the chat as well. Law Insider subscribers do get preferred pricing on TermScout. It equates to just under 25% off. And whoops, I just sent, I was just sending that to hosts and panelists. So there is the TermScout link to everybody. And here is the AI Field Guide link for everybody. And then wrapping up with TermScout, it's month to month. It's cancel anytime. At least check out and see, if only just watch the demo video really cool what they're doing with contract review, market analysis, benchmarking, favorability scores on terms and clauses, really interesting stuff. So that's a little Law Insider break / commercial. We will go back to Jamie and Polly for what do we have? We have a demo, or you just want to keep picking off some Q&A?
One thing to say is that form should work now. I've just quickly been in and changed that. That was a number form instead of a text field form. So that should be working now for you, for anybody who wants that template.
Great.
Right, so we've got 5 minutes left. We have the risk of doing live demos. We've just created a few screenshots of our platform and embedded them into this light demo in PowerPoint. The wonders of pre-recording, so I can talk over it. So, so thank you for anyone who wants to drop off and not be sold to, so we can draw a hard line in the sand. Before was learning, now talking about our platform and what Deploy does. So we've talked a lot about scope. You can tell we're very passionate about scope and making sure that it's right. We think that good scope is needed to make projects more effective. So as a writing platform, we have an enormous SaaS platform where you can create templates, you can create different scopes, you can create different rules, and you can create different workflows and approvals. We're not going to talk about all of that today. I think the entry criteria for any SaaS platform, that's the minimum criteria. We have contract drafting through a Q&A. We have collaboration and sharing. We have some clause libraries that are limited to more of the commercial clauses we spoke about. In fact, the Law Insider reach out was about how we could potentially use clause libraries where we don't have expertise, but there is expertise elsewhere. And of course, approvals and workflows. So I'm going to show you 2 features of Deployed that are the most highly coveted and help us to progress. The first one is a concept called guided scoping. Now, you heard before about authors and editors. One of the issues that authors have is how do they find a baseline for the scope they want to write? So guided scoping is the culmination of a 3-year arrangement with another organization called World Contracting and Commerce. And we work with their members, their experts. And what we've created is hundreds of certified scopes that cover a range of topics that many of our clients face across industries, from pharmaceutical to retail to banking to manufacturing. And when they're trying to acquire complex knowledge services like advice or consulting, or in this case, doing a current state assessment and market research, we've developed a library of standard scopes that can then be used as a baseline that include phases, deliverables, activities that you can see here, and then acceptance criteria that is linked to each activity. This is really important to provide a baseline, a better baseline than, say, the sales document or the RFP, to enable you to use a curated and expert validated scope. And so our clients are using this to enable authors or buy-side authors to be more educated and to be able to use, in a cut and paste way, the best practice wording they could use to enable them to write their scope in the right way. It's got really interesting features like you're adding durations, adding times that links back to the start date, auto creates people-person plans, all the things you would expect that are really difficult to navigate through a Word document is done digitally in the platform. So you can see here, this is me navigating around the platform. The next feature I'd like to show you is our pricing schedule. Now, we touched on pricing before, and we didn't provide too much detail, but in other webinars that we do and other learning is around how you price work effectively. So here is just a demo of how an example of a time and materials commercial schedule comes together. But gone are the days where people write into Excel, calculate what it is, cut it as a picture, paste it into Word, because if you're doing that as a salesperson, you can be guaranteed that that procurement person on the other end is having to read that document, retype the information into Excel, and it just creates this, enormously complex engagement that can be digitized. So what you're seeing here is how a user in the platform, once they navigate to a pricing table, can then start to add features like time and materials, performance incentives. They can add the role that you can see there, management consultant, but you can also add and link deliverables that might be from the guided scoping into the people that are delivering the work. We have 4 pricing models that work today: fixed price, time and materials, milestone, and retained. We've got 6 more in the works in terms of features, and we're trying to cover all of the different use cases and all of the different pricing models that we would have. So we are, they're the two features I wanted to show you today, which brings us exactly to an hour. So Josh, I'd like to say that was completely planned, but we kind of corralled ourselves into the right position to get to 1 hour, which is perfect. There's Polly's email there. My email is jamie@deployed.co. So you can email me directly. That comes straight to me. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's been such an engaged group, and I've seen all the questions. Anything that we've not answered, I think, Polly, what we'll do is add an FAQ to the last slide. And when we send this information out, in the coming week, then we should be able to answer those. So really thank you for your participation. And Polly, as you said, Josh.
Maybe that Josh wants to send, because he already has a handout for everybody. So maybe that we want to follow up with the FAQs just in case people want it front of their mind right away.
No problem.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Definitely. So we're at the top of the hour. First of all, just thank you to everybody that joined us. I mean, this was a highly engaging event. I appreciate all the questions and leaning in and interacting with each other. That's what makes these events fun, and we certainly hope it was valuable for you. And one way or the other, we will regroup and make sure that we are delivering everything we need to deliver to y'all based on your questions and requests and things. So there'll be follow-up email from us. So with that, I think it's we can wrap this up. Polly, Jamie, anything else as we say goodbye?
No, I really thank everybody who attended, because as you say, it's just it's really great to hear what everybody's doing, what everybody's working on, the kind of issues and problems they're having and the things they want solving. And yeah, we just hope to see you all again at some point. And good luck with your statements of work and your scope. Make it clear and necessary, verifiable, and achievable.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Polly, Jamie, thank you all. Very insightful. Enjoyed the content. Again, thanks for joining us today. We hope everybody has a phenomenal rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.